Yo, what's happening, everybody? Today is Tuesday, the 31st of March. Not really used to doing these things on Tuesdays, but it's going up. Fuck it. Feeling really under the weather. These allergies have been killing me since like last Wednesday or something. I'm pretty miserable. So anyway, we're gonna latha is what we're going with today. And we're gonna build, or I should say, I'm gonna throw the old Laguna Seca Badger in the latha to make some latha. This is kind of a yearly thing for me. It's allergies, man. They get me good. Shit's old. Really tired of it. So I guess first things first, for those of you that have been following my relocation and job hunt saga for, wow, nearly the past year now. I have a friend who is a realtor, and he had a couple that was really interested in getting they want to be in this building. And you know, he had them pretty well ready to go. You know, they were you know, kind of teeter-tottering on ownership versus renting, blah 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 blah. But they didn't. They ended up buying somewhere else or whatever. So now I'm gonna have to put the place on the market, which is fine because, quite frankly, now I can probably get a little bit more for it, and selling it's not going to be a problem. This neighborhood is pretty in demand, so I'm not really too terribly worried about it. Sucks that the convenience factor is not there, but in the words of the great Derek May, under the pseudonym Rhythm is Rhythm, it is what it is. And speaking of Derek May and Rhythm is Rhythm and all that good stuff, that's actually something that I've been kind of looking or reviewing, I guess, of late. You know, that whole sort of thing. This is taking a little bit longer to build the lather than it usually takes for me, which is weird. It's been ages. I can't smell shit. It's been ages since I've used this this soap, so I guess it's just I'm being a little gun shy with the water, but that's okay. There's worse things in the world. Anyway, so yeah, you know, for those of you that know me in real life, and even the people that have just come to know me, you know, through these videos and my various, you know, engagings on the internet or whatever that don't have to do with music, I am really into my music, dance music particularly, and the history of these dance musics. I'm really obsessive about, you know, finding out every single piece of history that I can, you know, for all these styles of music. And, you know, of my three great loves as far as dance music is concerned, drum and bass, techno, and house. House and techno are the two murkiest. The histories are just very murky. There's a lot of people making a lot of the same claims, and they're big claims. House more so than techno, but finally got this good. But I've been listening to a tune lately called Charivari, and that's spelled S-H-A-R-E-V-A-R-I. This is in Above the Tie R2 Atlas with a Gillette silver blue blade loaded in it, because that's the combo. I think this lather can still stand a bit of water. Anyway, yeah, Charivari. No. With regard to techno, there's no disputing the fact that Juan Atkins, Derek May, and Kevin Saunderson are the three people directly responsible for putting techno in this planet. Or Juan Atkins more so than either of the other two. They each have a nickname. Derek May, who is the most charismatic of the three, who used to release tunes under the name. One of the names he used was Rhythm is Rhythm. His nickname was The Innovator. Kevin Saunderson, his nickname was The Elevator. The reason that he's The Elevator is because he had two really big tunes in particular. The older of us that were, I guess around in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s may remember a couple tunes under the name Inner City, Big Fun, and Good Life. Those are Kevin Saunderson's big hits. And to this day, those tunes are enormous. You want to make a bunch of people run to the dance floor all at one time? Play Good Life and see what happens. Those enormous stab synths, they do it every single time. Anyway, and Juan Atkins' nickname is The Originator because he was the one. He was the one. If you can only say that one person is responsible for techno, it's Juan Atkins. Anyway. So that's, cut and dry. Now, with regard to the beginning of techno, the early stages of techno, it actually started off because here's the thing, you gotta understand, this is Detroit in the 80s. Things were rough, but there was still a generation, things were rough, but there was a generation of kids whose parents, worked in Detroit, lived the great American dream, and, they had those middle-class jobs that allowed them to have 2 homes, send their kids to college, 2 cars, all that good stuff. A lot of those kids, today, people would say that they come from privilege. Because, they were pretty well off financially, their parents were. So, a lot of these kids, there was a radio station, WJLB, and I know it sounds like I'm jumping around, but it all ties together. Radio station WJLB, there was a on-air personality named the Electrifying Mojo. The Electrifying Mojo, his show was pretty much freeform. That guy played whatever he wanted, he played whatever he wanted. He didn't have to, there was no, who are these people that are running the radio stations today? Clear Channel and blah blah blah. There was none of those. He didn't have to play keeping those people in mind. He could just play whatever he wanted. And the Electrifying Mojo was one of the big inspirations to the creation of techno. Because that guy would play all sorts of stuff that you normally wouldn't hear on black radio, quote unquote. Man, this lather just feels mega thick. Anyway, yeah. The Electrifying Mojo, Charles Johnson was his name. He would play whatever the hell he wanted to free format, completely free format. So he would play a lot of like European stuff. He also loved Prince. He would play entire Prince albums front to back on his radio show. And like when new Prince records were coming out, he would play again, he played Prince records front to back. Now, you know, this is how these kids grew up. They all listened to Mojo. So their musical tastes were everywhere. Lots of European influence. Kraftwerk. Big time Kraftwerk influence. And, I mean, you can tell in those early records. Like, well, the first one that Juan Atkins put out was Alleys of Your Mind. Now, here's the thing. Actually, let me back up just a little bit. So, you know, these kids, they had all these weirdo musical influences, and they also, I shouldn't say weirdo, just very varied. There was a really healthy high school party scene in Detroit going on in the early 80s. And the way that I understand it, a lot of these kids, they would pledge allegiance to, you know, these various party crews. They would wear shirts, hats with logos, that sort of thing. There was Charivari, was a big one, and another one was Derek Mays, and man, I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called. That's embarrassing. I don't really know. Space something or other, I want to say. Anyway, so, you know, there were these party crews, right? And Charivari, you know, there was a tune, there was a particular tune that, you know, some of the kids that went to those parties threw together. And the name of the tune is Charivari, of course, in homage to the parties. And I've been listening to that record a lot of late, and I've never really been too into that record too much. And I'll link all these particular tunes that I'm talking about at the bottom. But so they released that tune, and they didn't really release it per se. They pressed up about, the way I understand it, they pressed up about 500 copies, and they just sold them to the people, you know, that frequented, their parties. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Derek May's party crew was Deep Space, I think is what it was called. Anyway, so yeah, they released their tune, Charivari, and they released it under the name, I guess the artist title, A Number of Names, because it was a bunch of kids that wrote the tune. The guy electrifying Mojo, he heard the record and really liked it, played it on air, and he wanted them to come by the studio. So the story goes that there was a gang of people that showed up, a gang of kids. I mean, like dozens. And he was like, "So, I mean, what's happening here? You know, you guys all wrote this tune. Like, you don't even have a name. What's happening here?" And he's like, "Well, you know," the kids were like, "Well, you know, we don't really have a name. We just wrote the tune." And he's like, "Well, you know, what's your name so I can talk about you on the air?" And he said, "Well, you know, there's a bunch of us." So Mojo just came up with a number of names as, you know, what to call them, and that stuck. They released Charivari under the name A Number of Names, and that was that. A couple weeks later, if all the accounts that I've read are to be believed, a couple weeks later, Juan Atkins released a tune called Alleys of Your Mind with another guy called Rick Davis. But they released the tune. If I'm not mistaken, I think that one was released as Model 500. Man, this lather is thirsty. Yeah, they released the tune Alleys of Your Mind a couple weeks later. Now, both of those guys, they'll both tell you that they released the first techno record. there's been, I guess, one of the things that that has always, I guess, kind of been out there, because it's a much more romantic thing to think that Juan Atkins was the guy that put out the first techno record, because quite frankly, after Charivari, you never heard from a number of names again. Whereas Juan Atkins, you know, he went on to do his thing. He was huge. He, for those of you that like that Missy Elliott tune, Music Makes Me Lose Control or whatever, that beat is not, that's a Juan Atkins beat. It's called Clear by Cybotron. Cybotron was the name that Juan Atkins released that tune under. Look it up on YouTube. Actually, I'll link it. They didn't do anything. They just remastered it, quote unquote, just made it louder. So, you know, the thing about Charivari was that a lot of people don't consider it techno. A lot of people think they consider it Italo disco, which, you know, Italo disco is what it sounds like. It's Italian music that was kind of, you know, reminiscent of disco. One of the biggest Italo disco records was The Chase by Giorgio Moroder, which is also pretty much the same as the background music of I Feel Love by Donna Summer. And if you want to really split hairs, you could argue that that Alleys of Your Mind by Juan Atkins is not really a techno record per se, because it doesn't have that 4-on-the-floor kick drum. It actually sounds a lot more like electro than techno, which is another Detroit-based music. That's another story. One that admittedly I don't know as well as house or techno or drum and bass. But yeah, and you know, it really does, it is very Italo disco, talking about the Charivari record. It is very Italo disco, because like I said, it's very reminiscent of The Chase by Giorgio Moroder and a lot of other Italo disco records. But the thing is, like, that Charivari record, that was a time capsule, you know, because that was a very unique set of circumstances. Here you've got, you know, a bunch of kids that, you know, I guess came from upper middle class type of money, but that were living in a city that was already, like, you know, in pretty rough shape, as much as I hate to admit it. And, you know, they threw these extravagant parties. And here's the thing. You know, they had no clue about, you know, all this stuff that they liked. Like, they had no idea about these artists. Like, Kraftwerk. If you're familiar with Kraftwerk, they're like 4 German dudes that'll get on stage in suits behind a bunch of weird-looking synthesizers and drum machines and write electronic music. A lot of it's not dancey per se, and you know, when compared to you know, stuff like what was coming out from Detroit and Chicago at the time. But I mean, it wasn't like anything else out there. So, you know, you've got these kids in that environment, and a lot of them, you know, they just thought they were kind of, I'm really trying to think of how you would say it in English, but in Spanish you call them come mierda. They just kind of thought their shit didn't stink, you know? That's how I understand it. But, you know, like these records, that record Charivari in particular is just very, it really captures that whole thing. Case in point, this is something that I always forget about. The catalog number for Charivari is P928, okay? Now, it was released, the name of the label was Capriccio Records. I think that was the only release that was ever on that label. And generally speaking, catalog number on a record, Capriccio, it'll be like 3 letters and then 3 numbers. Usually an abbreviation of the label name and then whatever, you know, number release it is, like sequential. And let me do this real quick. Okay, so, you know, conventional thinking would be that, you know, Capriccio number 1 would be CPR 001. First record on Capriccio, right? This motherfucker's, the catalog number for that record is P928, in reference to a Porsche 928, which was, I mean, that was the car back then. If I'm not mistaken, it was referenced in another, in a Juan Atkins record from back in the day called Night Drive. Time, Space, Transmat. There's two versions of that tune. I'll link them both. One has more lyrics than the other one, if you call them lyrics. More just like, honestly, it's just words that go along with the name, what I guess these people, you know, would think the word techno means in the early 80s. So yeah, you know, it's just very, I don't know, I think that's just, it's a very curious little encapsulation of a moment of time. Anyway, so yeah, Charivari, like I said, that one, some people will tell you that's the first techno record. I mean, you know, from what I understand, it actually was sequentially the first one. You know, whether it's a straight Detroit techno record is, that's not, I don't have a dog in that fight. Italo disco really isn't my thing, but I guess I don't mind it every now and again. I do like the chase though. Gene Ferris actually did a really good remix of it that came out in the late 90s, and it was burning up dance floors all over the place. I think that's when it came out, was the late 90s. But anyway, yeah. So I've been listening to that record a lot lately, and it's pretty cool, I guess. Just, you know, when you think about just the bigger, I guess, set of circumstances of when that record came out, you know, what it signified and all that good stuff, it's pretty damn cool, actually. I'd love to know whatever happened to those guys. You know, again, I don't think that they've ever released another piece of music. They have to know at this point that it was a very influential piece of music. And I guess one of the big reasons that I've been thinking about this is because the festival is coming up in Detroit. Whatever that holiday is in May, Labor Day, I can never remember what the hell the proper name of that holiday is, even though it's such a big weekend every year for me. But yeah, it's coming up, and Juan Atkins is going to be playing as Model 500, I believe. I don't quite remember the lineup so much this year. But Derek May and Kevin Saunderson are going to be tag teaming, and that should be good. There's actually, the lineup this year is pretty outrageous. I'm a little bit older than a lot of the people that go to the festival, and I'm A-okay with that. And when I do go to the festival, there's 5 stages, okay? It's held in Hart Plaza, downtown Detroit. There's 5 stages that are set up in this plaza. And as a side note, like, man, this, if you take a look at like on Google Maps, like satellite view of Hart Plaza in downtown Detroit, it's fucking perfect for the festival. How that was not built specifically for the DEMF is beyond me. Part of me, well, all of me wants to think that they, you know, could see into the future, but if they could see into the future, I think most people would have a completely different opinion of Detroit. But there, again, there's 5 stages. I spend almost all of my time at a stage called the Made in Detroit stage. That's where, like, you can say, well, I can say my ass. That's absolutely where Detroit techno lives in that festival. Because there's a lot of different kinds of techno. Detroit techno, one of them, which in the strictest definition of the term is actually a dead music. But again, that's another discussion. So the Made in Detroit stage is where I spend nearly all my time. A lot of times, the other 4 stages at the festival feel like that. They feel like stages at a festival. Nothing wrong with that. You know, that's what a lot of people are there for. But to me, the Made in Detroit stage feels like a party. That's where the older crowd is. That's where a lot of the people that live in Detroit spend their time. That's where a lot of the people that are from Detroit play. It's just, man, like I said, it's a party. And I've been going, you know, for 5 years now. There's people that I see every year at the festival. Never see them anywhere else, of course, because I don't live in Detroit. But they're always really cool to me. We always remember each other, even though we may not know our names. But we always talk and catch up. There's one gentleman, older guy, huge dude. He's probably like, he's got to be 6'5", enormous dude. Probably like late 40s, early 50s. Cool as fuck, man. He tells me about his grandkids, his daughters, or his granddaughter, excuse me. Super, super smart. He's telling me that, you know, the last time that I saw him, his girl was going into high school. He was telling me that his granddaughter, excuse me, is going into high school, and she's, you know, doing the AP thing and everything, and he's just so proud of her, you know. But this old dude, man, he always has on a bunch of Pistons gear. He's cool as fuck, man. I wish I could remember his name. I want to say it's Quentin or something. But yeah, you know, it's where the old people are, it's where the locals are. And it's just so much more fun, to me, than the other stages. Now that's not to say I don't go to the other stages, of course, but I spend the great majority of my time at the main Detroit stage. But yeah, again, the reason that I was, you know, thinking about all this is because Juan Atkins is going to be playing as Model 500, if I'm not mistaken. I've never seen him play as Model 500. He's not really the best DJ in the world, so I don't really care to see him play records. Speaking of people that are playing that are not the greatest DJs in the world, Disclosure is going to be playing records. Playing records at the festival rather than doing their live act. That's going to be weird, and I'm probably not going to be there for that. But I am going to be there for Carl Craig. Carl Craig and Mad Mike Banks are going to be doing a live PA, and that is going to be something special. A live PA, I guess, is be the closest approximation to like a conventional concert performance where, you know, the music is being created in front of your face. Instead of being played back, it's being created in front of you. So that should be really good. Those two dudes are incredible. Particularly Mad Mike Banks. That guy is really something else. I've met a lot of people in dance music, and that is the only person that I've ever been starstruck to meet. But he's a super nice guy. I met him at He owns something called Underground Resistance, which is a big record label. And he also runs a company called Submerge, which is like the largest techno distributor in the world. He runs it out of a building. The address is 3000 East Grand Boulevard in Detroit. And he runs it out of that building, and they also have a record store there. Record store, of course, is called Submerge. You can't just walk into Submerge. You have to make an appointment to buy records. And it's funny because when you make your appointment, you know, you come by, you knock on the door. It's a huge, heavy steel door. You would never know what this place is unless you knew what it was. And it's always somebody that, you know, is an underground resistance artist. That's always who answers the door. And I've met quite a few people, you know, that are pretty big in the techno world. And, you know, as far as Detroit techno is concerned, because they just open the door to the record store so I can go shopping for records, which is always pretty cool. But I remember one day I was down there. I think this is actually the very first time that I went to Submerge. Oh shit, that's loud. Hang on. So, yeah, I was shopping for records, and Mike's sister, her name is Bridget Banks, is the one who handles that sort of thing. And, you know, I was down there talking to Bridget. It's the first time I met her, but I'd communicated with her extensively over email. She remembered me, which was really cool. And then I heard a very familiar voice in the background. Very familiar voice in the background. And lo and behold, it was Mike Banks. And I was like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, yo, you know, big fan of your work. Thank you so much for everything. You know, your music really means the world to me. Talked for a little bit. He was like, so where you from, dude? And I told him I lived in Nashville. And he says, motherfucking Nashville. And I don't know why, but that shit was hilarious to me. And I'll never forget that. But that was actually really, really cool. Oh, aftershave. Good old Tiger Balm. Got some things to do. Don't really feel like hitting people with 3 ounces of clubbing. Although sometimes people need to be hit with 3 ounces of clubbing. So anyway, yeah, that's my Mad Mike story. I'm sticking to it. Anyway, I blabbered on for a while. Gotta go to Home Depot. Don't feel so good. Hope it works out. Anyways, I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good week, and hopefully I'll feel better by Sunday, so that way I can do another one of these. Peace. Bye, you guys.